So today is Palm Sunday, and it is the beginning of Holy Week. And on this day, Jesus puts into place a series of events that will culminate with his crucifixion and resurrection. Now, from an outer appearance, this seems to be a day of joy and of celebration. It is the moment that the Jewish people have been waiting for, and they've known the prophecies that someday this Messiah is going to show up and free them from the oppression of the Romans, so that they no longer have to live in slavery and they can take back Jerusalem. Now, Jesus knows, being a Jew himself, he knows about all the prophecies. And so in some ways, I see that he is almost setting people up, because the truth is, there are two things happening at the same time on this day. There are like two dimensions happening within this one experience. I want to read to you from the scripture from the book of Matthew, chapter 21. As they approached Jerusalem and came to Bethphage on the Mount of Olives, Jesus sent two disciples, saying to them, "Go to the village ahead of you, and at once you will find a donkey tied there with her colt. Untie them and bring them to me. And if anyone says anything to you, say the Lord needs them, and he will send them right away." Now, what Jesus was doing is he knew there were a number of prophecies that would predict when the Messiah was going to return. And this is the scripture from the Old Testament. "Say to daughter Zion, see, your king comes to you, gentle and riding on a donkey, and on a colt, the foal of a donkey." So, of course, the people knowing this prophecy are thrilled. So they're shouting, "Hosanna in the highest." They're waving their palm branches. They're throwing their cloaks in front of Jesus, thinking, finally, we're going to get rid of the Romans. Finally, we're going to get Jerusalem back. Finally, we are done with this oppression that we have been living under. So from an outer appearance, it was a day of celebration. It was the culmination of Jesus' ministry. Yet, the scripture in the book of Luke reads this way. The Pharisees tell Jesus to get his disciples and everybody to be quiet and just, knock it off. And, he says, "Teacher, rebuke your disciples." And Jesus says, "I tell you, if they keep quiet, even the stones will cry out." As he approached Jerusalem and he saw the city, he wept over it. And he said, "If you, even you, had only known on this day what would bring you peace, but now it is hidden from you." So we have this incredible celebration that's happening. And then at the same time, Jesus is crying. And I think what was happening is he knew that people weren't getting his real message. And he wanted to get their attention. He wanted to make sure they were paying attention. So how else to do that but to fulfill a prophecy? Because his kingdom was not of an earthly kingdom. His kingdom was of a spiritual kingdom. In fact, most of his message was, the kingdom of heaven is in the midst of you. The kingdom of heaven is not here or not there, but the kingdom of heaven is within you. And he describes all these different ways that the kingdom is, that it is expanding. It is always expanding. So it is the awareness of God within. He reminds us that we have a rich inner world, and what we perceive inside of us is what we live. As within, so without, on earth as it is in heaven. So in some ways, it appears to me that Jesus set the crowd up. And in that moment, they projected their hopes and their dreams onto him. How many times have we projected our hopes and our wishes onto a public figure? Whether it be a politician or a charismatic spiritual leader or a movie star, we project our hopes and our wishes onto them. We project both our positive qualities and our negative qualities onto them. When I first started studying yoga and unity, one of the stories that I heard over and over again to demonstrate the power of the mind and projection was that of a prospector who was living in the hills. Anybody know this story? You'll know it when I tell it. So it goes back to the times when movies were brand new and hardly anybody had seen them, the silent movies. And there was a prospector who wanted to see what a movie was like. So he slipped in the back door while the movie was playing. And on this screen, he sees cowboys and Indians running in, shooting their guns. And sitting in the back row, having never seen a movie before, he pulls out his gun and he shoots the screen. How many heard that story? It illustrates how we project our inner world onto the outer world, and how many times we may shoot at something that's out there when really it's inside of us. So I want to look at this from a number of different levels. So last week I was in Los Angeles. I was visiting my son and attending a seminar. And the first couple of days I got there early, and Jordan and I went to Disneyland, which I love. Now, I hadn't been to California Adventure in a number of years, and last time I was there, I was too afraid to go on the Tower of Terror. Anybody know the Tower of Terror? Yes. So I said, this time I'm going on the Tower of Terror, and I'm already, so the Tower of Terror is an old 1930s hotel, and Rod Serling is talking to you as you're going in, that you're in the Twilight Zone, and you're getting in an elevator that you're sitting in. You're in an elevator, and the elevator goes up to, I don't know, the 5th floor or something, and the door opens, and you're sitting there, and you see all these people. They're just, a projection, but they're dancing. It's in the 30s, and Rod Serling says, oh, these Hollywood starlets from the 30s, they were having such a great time, but then they entered into the Twilight Zone. And they were all struck by lightning, or something happened to them, and right before you, they turn into ghosts. And he says, I hope the same thing doesn't happen to you. And the doors close, and the elevator drops about 10 stories into pitch darkness. It catches itself, and it goes back up, falls a couple more times, and then it goes to the very top, which I assume is like 20 stories. I don't really know. And when you're at the top, the doors open again, only this time there's nothing in front of you. There's no door, there's no window, there's no wall. You're looking out all over Disneyland, all over California Adventure, and the light blinds you. And as soon as you realize that you're hanging out there, the doors close and you drop into a pit of darkness once again. Disney is masterful at getting you to fear your own death and face it in seconds. So when we were finished with the ride, I was trembling. I was so scared. And I told Jordan, I said, I need to go on this again because it scared me too much. And I like to do things, if they scare me too much, I have to do them over and over again. But this time, when I was waiting for the ride, I was watching people. And I was watching how they were projecting their fears onto the ride. And how some of them were very cool and nonchalant and like, they didn't really care about what was going to happen and that they were going to drop into a pit of darkness. And then others, you could see them pacing and chewing on their nails and shuffling their feet and moving in. So they were all projecting their experience onto this ride, just as we all project our experiences onto everything that happens to us in our lives. A projection is when we take a disowned part of our psyche and we project it onto others. Now, the Course in Miracles says, what you project, you disown, and therefore do not believe it is yours. You are therefore excluding yourself from it by the very statement that you are making, that you are different from someone else. It is solely a device of the ego to make you feel different from your brothers and separated from them. So we know, particularly, that we're projecting when we have a strong reaction to something. Anybody? You know, like when you overreact to something, that's when you know that you're probably projecting. So when we point the finger and we blame, guess what? There's 3 fingers pointing back at us, right? So an example would be being cut off in traffic. Say you were cut off in traffic and you had this extreme reaction to it. You got really angry. Marcia Weeder, who was the leader of the seminar I was at last week, said, we need to ask ourselves 3 questions when we find ourselves overreacting to a situation. The first question is, when have I felt this way before? So if you're cut off in traffic and you're really mad and you're really angry, the first question is, when have I felt this way before? When have I felt cut off before? Maybe when I was a kid, nobody paid attention to me, or I started to talk and they cut me off. The second question is, when have I done this to others? Not such an easy question, is it? When have I done this to others? When have I cut somebody else off? Either with my car or with my words. When have I done it to somebody else? And the third question is, when do I do this to myself? When do I cut myself off? When I have a great idea, do I shut it down? The highest payoff of projection, when we own all parts of ourselves, the highest payoff is that blame disappears and we become more peaceful and almost immune to reacting to things that happen to us in the world. I think that we have seen a huge example of projection this last couple of weeks in Florida with what happened to the 17-year-old African-American boy, Trayvon Martin. He was on his way to the store to get some Skittles, to get some candy in a gated community, and he was wearing a hoodie, and the neighborhood watch captain started to follow him and called the police and thought he was suspicious looking. And many of you know the story, of course, that he was shot and he was killed. That is an example of this man projecting. Yeah? He sees a young African-American boy, young man, in a hoodie, and he immediately projects onto him that he's going to hurt somebody or that he's going to rob somebody, when in truth, he was on his way to the store to buy candy. He was buying himself candy. The Course in Miracles says, projection reinforces your belief in your own split mind, and its only purpose is to keep the separation going. Is that not true? You know, we project onto other countries, and we keep the separation going. We project our shadows onto all kinds of things, and it keeps the separation going. And according to the Course in Miracles, it's what the ego is looking for. There's a story about a man who was sitting in front of his store in a little town, and a young man came up to him and he said, I just moved to this town, and I was wondering, what are the people like here? And the old man said, well, what were the people like in the town you just came from? And he said, well, they weren't very nice. You know, they weren't very friendly. They kind of kept to themselves. It wasn't a very good town. And the old man said, well, I'm afraid you're going to find the same people here. Town is exactly the same as the one you left. A couple days later, the old man is sitting in front of his store, and another man approaches him and he says, hello, I'm new in town, and I was just wondering, what are the people like in this town? And the old man said, well, what were the people like in the town you just came from? And he said, oh, they were great. I mean, they were really friendly, and it was a wonderful community, and I really didn't want to leave, but I had to move. And the old man says, well, you'll find that people here are exactly the same as the one that you left. We take ourselves everywhere we go, right? We can change relationships, and, you know, you still take yourself with that. Well, you can move to a new town and you take yourself. It's what the main message that Jesus was giving us is that the Spirit of God is within us, but so is our world, that we are constantly projecting out. So Marcia Wieder gave some suggestions about what to do when you find that you're projecting, particularly in relationships. So the best places to work out our projections are in community and in relationship. Anybody do any projection in your personal relationships? Anybody? So she suggests these 4 steps when you find that you are projecting. And the first is to simply state when you cut me off in traffic, or when you started ordering me around, or when you criticized me, or when you just fill it in, but you have to describe the behavior. It's not like, you have to describe the behavior. When you cut me off, I felt disempowered. I felt disengaged. I felt totally dissed. So the second is I felt. The third is the impact on me was. The impact on me was I felt like I couldn't breathe, that I was like a small child again, back in that place. And then the fourth is my request is. My request is that we learn to say this differently. My request is that we can work through this and discuss it. I felt, the impact on me was, and my request is. On Palm Sunday, Jesus set into motion a series of events that culminated in his crucifixion and his resurrection. He invites the crowd to project their hopes and wishes onto him because he knows that they didn't get it. They didn't get his message. The message was not about an outer kingdom. It was not about worldly riches. It was about the idea that the kingdom of heaven is within, that it is in the midst of us, that we have a rich inner world. And the truth is that we are always projecting that inner world out onto others. The truth of our being is that we are divine and that there is oneness. And I believe that the practice of owning all sides of ourselves, the shadow and the light, by working through our projections, is high spiritual work right now, don't you think? So we don't need any more young boys being shot. We don't need any more going to war, really, because as we learn that the whole world is within us and that what we're putting out is a reflection of that, as we do our work and stand in that, I believe that's where peace actually will come from, where peace will actually manifest, because we have to have it within ourselves first. It is our highest spiritual practice. Again, Jesus said, if you, even you, had only known it on this day, what would bring you peace? But now it's hidden from your eyes. 2,000 years later, we are opening our eyes. We are seeing what he was talking about, and we're living that truth. So I invite you to walk through this story with us this week. Thursday night, we'll have our candle lighting and our communion. And Sunday, we'll celebrate the awakening and the resurrection. As we hold all parts of ourselves, as we honor the divinity that we really are, may that be what gets put out into the world. Have a good Holy Week.